I could tell by all the conversation over the break that our organizers of the symposium have done an excellent job because everyone seems to be learning from one another and talking, enjoying themselves. Nice job, everybody. And thank you to Dr. Park for getting us started today. That was fantastic. Wherever you are, thank you so much. After this symposium today, all of our brains will be different. Say that one more time. After our symposium today, all of our brains will be different. I think that's important. I think as you look around the room, you might ask yourself, I wonder whose brain might change the most. So look around. I'm curious if anyone has any guesses. We have parents here, scholars, professionals from different fields. Any guesses? My guess would be the cutest person here. And I had to write down their name. Would that be baby Kaini? Hi, baby. Thank you for coming, Kaini. As you may know, babies' brains change at an astounding rate. They learn more every minute than we do as adults. So glad you're here. Hope you learn a lot. Thank you for the introduction. I am Scott Bellman, it's true. Work at the University of Washington. And I'd like to tell you how I think about an experience like today, a symposium like today. All of us have invested time to be here, and I really believe that we all have something to offer today. Everyone has expertise, everyone has something to share, maybe an experience with a student or something you've learned along the way, an article that you read, something from your work, perhaps. And I know that's true. I sat for one of the table talks with Melissa and Alyssa and Yoko. Where are you? And there they are. And just from their experiences and what they shared, I know they have a lot to share. And I've only met 3 people, and all 3 of them, that was the case. So thank you for coming. I hope you feel the same way that I do on that front. I'd like to tell you about a project that we've been running at the University of Washington. We've been running it for 3 years. We are in our 4th year. The project is called Neuroscience for Neurodiverse Learners, and it provides hands-on experiences, neuroscience disciplines, networking opportunities, and resources to high school and early post-secondary students. We provide resources for educators and stakeholders. We have a website and a knowledge base, and we do participate in workshops like this one today, and we are creating publications that we think might be helpful to parents and educators and others. For those of you grant writers out there, I will share, we submitted this grant 3 times. We were rejected twice, and the 3rd time that grant was funded. And I tell that to our students, that we failed twice, and we learned a lot from those failures, and on the 3rd time, we were successful. So I just like sharing with students that failure is part of success. The project that we're talking about today is a partnership between the Do It Center, where I work, and a center at the University of Washington called the Center for Neurotechnology, which received 10 years of funding from the National Science Foundation to help develop brain implants to help the human body heal and move, restore movement. And that center is now graduated from NSF funding, and it is in its 13th year. I will tell you, my wife always tells me, get to the point. I will tell you, my final slide today has everything you need to know. So don't feel like you have to take a bunch of notes, really pay attention and stuff. Just enjoy the talk, enjoy each other, and you have access to these slides. And so that's the point, is it'll all be there before this. But I'd like to start. This is my first example of a strategy for working with neurodivergent students. I'm going to tell you what we are doing today and why it's important. I learned this from a presenter through the Tapped into STEM Alliance, who was presenting by the TILT model of education. It stands for Transparency in Learning and Teaching. And I encourage you to explore that model. There's a lot of stuff online about it. And one of the foundational elements of that model is tell your students, in this case, tell the people who are taking their time to listen to me, this is what we're doing today, and this is why it's important. So today I'm going to be encouraging you and inviting you to create brain hats with me and with your table. And we're doing this for 3 reasons. One, this is a real-time example of what we do with our neurodivergent students in the classroom. Number 2, we can use these brain hats today in our discussion about engaging all students. And number 3, building them together creates something hands-on for you to do, and it also offers opportunities to demonstrate various principles about engaging all learners as we go along. This activity has been championed by our wonderful education director, Dr. Eric Chudler. I have a picture of Dr. Chudler on the next slide. Yes, if you haven't heard, Dr. Chudler at the University of Washington is a golden retriever, a world-renowned neuroscientist. He holds a PhD in psychology and has published multiple books. And I got to tell you, I worked with him for a very long time. And I will admit that at times it does feel like he's got 2 left feet. He prefers to use the word kilogram because he really hates the pound. I did go with him once to a flea circus, and he stole the show. Thank you. He has been, by the way, thank you so much. Yeah. He has been, by the way, awarded 2 Northwest Emmys for his educational videos, and we'll talk about that in a moment. What I wanted to say here is that it's okay to use humor. I do like to joke around a lot. I like to have fun at work. And when we got awarded this funding, I was approached by more than one person who said, Scott, you need to be careful with your joking around because these neurodivergent students, many of them won't get the joke. They're going to be thinking too concretely, and you're going to lose a lot of people along the way. So I thought about that a lot, and unfortunately for me, it's hard for me to not joke around and have a good time. But I did learn some things, and what I learned is it's okay to use humor. And I learned that by asking the students. I asked them directly, how can I be funny? How does that work? And a lot of them said, they want to be funny and have fun and do funny things and hear funny jokes. It might be challenging for them. They might not understand it all the time, but they want to hear, I want to know that people are laughing at me. And it really helps me to sometimes explain the joke, and so I've kind of taken that to heart. I still joke around a lot, but I do slow down a little bit. I'll explain my jokes often, and I will check in with students, like, how is this for you? So that's a strategy that I use with neurodivergent learners. I find with students, having fun, it really draws their attention and draws them in. I will add, it doesn't work very well over email. So I quit joking over email with the students. That's much, much harder. But in person, you have opportunities to explain. Today, as we go about talking about these strategies for working with neurodivergent learners, I'd like to also share with you some of the areas of the brain that are in play during some of these things. And I think humor is really interesting because different types of humor are processed in different areas of the brain. And so, for example, for semantic jokes, blood flow will increase in the bilateral posterior temporal lobes. Right? So bilateral means across both sides. Posterior is the back of the lobe. And the lobe in question in this case is the temporal lobe. We get our brain hats put together, our tables, we can point out these areas of the brain, right? So the temporal lobe, and it is the across both sides and near the back. For puns, a totally different area of the brain is activated. So for puns, jokes activate the left inferior prefrontal cortex. And that is over here. And that part of the brain, it processes, it's phonological, right? It processes sounds. So if you're doing puns, right, it's comparing sounds, trying to figure out what's going on. And so we use our brain hats with the students because we're learning about neuroscience. And today we'll use them a little bit to talk about which of these strategies light up like which parts of the brain and how that kind of works. All that to say, we do have our Dr. Chugger there. That's the real Dr. Chugger. He's our education director for our project, and he did win 2 Northwest Emmy Awards for a TV series that he has produced called Brainworks. And he works with students to produce a video series about the brain and why it's important to protect your brain and have a healthy brain and how the brain works. He's also our lead UW faculty member for our Tapped into STEM project. And he's really great. So the students will ask him a lot of questions, and he's always the scientist. He will always say, you know, I don't necessarily know the answer to that, but let's talk about what the data suggests, what questions we might ask you next. And so I love having him on the team. He's a fantastic person. So I'd like to, as I said, make brain hats with you today. And so there's materials to make the hats at every table. Every person has a hat to be made if you like. And the way that you do that is you share the crayons at the table. And first of all, you color in the lobes of the brain. And it does help if you match the left side and the right side, because those lobes will come across. That's page 1 and page 2. Those lobes will come across your brain hat. And you're welcome to begin that right now, right? So break out your crayons, pass out your brain hat papers, and you could begin coloring in lobes. And like I said, don't necessarily worry about taking notes today. We have all the materials in our presentations that are available. So let's start making some brain hats. If you, by the way, if you are a person who has low vision, or maybe you're blind or otherwise can't see the material on the paper, I did bring 2 little brain models that are 3D representations of the brain, and I'm happy to get those to you if you'd like to have more of a 3D model that you can use today during our talk. Just let me know when you get these to you. Now, while we're making brain hats today, you might experience some things at your table. You might experience people going at different speeds. So some people are racing through and getting done really fast, and maybe you might feel like you're kind of slow. Or you might get through your brain hat really fast. You might feel like other people are really slow. You might get frustrated. You might break a crayon. Someone might be hogging the color that you like way too long. You want that crayon? You gotta wait. You might experience people offering to help you, or people offering help, or you needing help at the table. And you also might experience some distraction. So here I am talking to you while you're thinking about coloring your hat and how you might cut it later and those kinds of things. And here I am giving a talk while I'm asking you to do something. So I just gave you an example of social narrative. How many people in here have heard of social narrative before? I see a show of hands. Some. Okay, great. Social narrative, this is really important. So this is a strategy for working with neurodivergent learners, and it's a really good one. Social narrative, on the slide here, explains a social situation to a student so they can better predict and understand events, as well as the potential thoughts, feelings, and actions of other people. Right, so I just did that for you, right? I just explained some of the things you might experience while you're making your brain hat today. And at school, you can use social narrative all the time, right? You might say something like, okay, students, tomorrow we're gonna go into a wet lab, chemistry lab, that we've never been in there before. Show them a picture of that lab. Talk about some of the smells they might smell in that lab. Talk about some of the parts of the room that are short on space, that are tight on space, and how it can feel a little crowded in some parts of that room. And what people have learned is that providing the social narrative ahead of time, that really helps not only neurodivergent learners, but all learners feel more comfortable as they move forward with the project, right? And so a lot of the things I'm sharing today, that will help all learners, which is just the great beauty of preparing to work with neurodivergent learners, right? Everybody benefits when you implement this stuff. If you'd like more examples of social narratives, like if I'm talking and you're like, oh, Scott, that sounds really cool, I want to get more into that, you're on the right track. And there are some really great ones online, and I'll tell you where you can find them. The Intrepid Museum has a great example. Intrepid Museum is an aircraft carrier museum that's located on the Hudson River in New York City. And it's a sea, air, and space museum. It's incredibly cool. I want to get there. I've never been there. Has anybody been there? Oh, a lot of people. Okay, great. Well, if you had looked at their website before you went, they have a social narrative. And it talks about what it looks like when you're on the street driving up to the museum. It has pictures of the entrance and talks about what you might see and hear as you enter the building. And it talks about some of the noises and sounds, quiet rooms, and describes all the exhibits. And it's called a social narrative. It's right there on their website. That's one example of many that you'll find at a consortium called the Museum Arts and Culture Access Consortium. And so I encourage you to incorporate social narrative in your work. It works really well, and again, it works for all learners. Pull my brain hat back out again. And so there is a brain area, the anterior lateral prefrontal cortex, okay? So that prefrontal cortex is up here. So the anterior is the very front, lateral are the sides, okay? And that part of the brain, right there in the front, so right here, that is critical for estimating our future chances of success. Huge part of the brain right there. And that advanced sense of how we will fare oftentimes determines the tasks that we are most likely to attempt and those that we might shy away from, right? And so the case I'm trying to make is that social narrative will make it more likely that the students will have an imagining of being successful, an imagining of what that might be like, and shy away from less types of things. Great. Checking my time. So, I'd like to invite you at your table, as you color and prepare your brain hat, to talk about this question. What is the basic building block of all learning? And at your table, I'd like you to try to figure out if you have a common answer to that, if you all have different answers to that question. But see if you can figure out what you might want to report out. I might invite some tables to report out what you talked about in a few minutes. So what is the basic building block of all learning? Let's spend about 10 minutes working on our brain hats and having this table discussion. And I'm going to come around and answer any questions that you might have about your brain hat. So talk away. Feel free to talk. Sienna, can you hold up your brain hat? Sienna has belonged very well. Just hold it very high. And has assembled a hat. See it all came together, so it does work, right, Sienna?
Yes.
Okay. Is there a table who may be willing to share what they discussed about our table question? Yes, they are. Okay. Maybe that might be John.
I'm like, shoot, we might do it already.
We thought perhaps basic building would be communication, so just language, whether it's sign language or braille or spoken language, so something in order to teach, they have that language.
Okay, communication. Information in, information out. Right, communication, that's great. Okay. Any other table? There's no right answer. Anyone come up with a good idea, they think? The basic building block of all learning? Okay, thank you for volunteering.
The young upon knowledge, skills.
Okay, sharing of ideas and knowledge and skills. Thank you. Is it the same? Lufan. Thank you, Lushan.
We talk about in this table, the building block will be reading, math, writing, and then they said experience and curiosity.
Okay, let me check if I got that. So reading, mathematics, and writing, and then curiosity, and I think he said one more thing. Experience. That's a good answer. Okay. Oh, someone over here. Coming. These are great. It's all true.
I was trying to think about maybe any stimulant, right, as a learning opportunity. So any kind of opportunity to learn. You learn coding.
Just being in a world and stimulate our things, and you will learn it, right? Isn't that right, baby?
Were you going to say?
That's correct. All right. Well, I want to come back and talk talk at you a little more, if that's okay. I do appreciate your kind attention, and I hope you get something from all of this. Nice job on your brain hats, by the way. I'd like to continue my talk, here we go. And I'm right on the timing. I'm trying to be. I'd like to share with you a little bit more about what we do with our students in the classroom for our Neuroscience for Neurodiverse Learners project. We work with both high school students and early college students, and we teach them about scientific communication. So we show them science, and then we encourage them to think about, now how would you explain this when you go home? How would you explain this to your parents? How would you go and explain this to your teacher at your high school? How would you explain it to a scientist? We get the students thinking about that, right? That's one of the foundational skills for young STEM students, right? We work on social skills and teamwork. And one strategy that I use with our neurodivergent students is I'm just very genuine with them. Right? So I'll give you an example right now. I'm anxious right now. I feel anxious giving this talk, and I hope it goes well, and I hope people learn something. And what do you do? I'm just going to ask the group, what do you do when you're feeling anxious to control your anxiety? What do you do to help yourself? Anybody? Breathe. Okay, breathe. Okay. Well, breathe. Okay. Smell the roses, blow out the candles, right? In through the nose, out through the mouth. Yeah, breathe in. Science has shown that can help calm anxiety. What else? What else do people do?
Well, I'll use drama.
I did hear it, but it wasn't good. Oh, watch Korean drama. Okay, that works. That works. If you'll excuse me, all I'm going to try to get some Korean drama on the laptop here. Watch a little bit. Okay. What else? What else? Anything else? Ask for audience participation. Yeah, take the focus off of me and put it on you. That's perfect. How about positive self-talk? Like, Scott, you could do this. Yeah, I got it. How about that? So I often share my vulnerabilities with the students. Another one I'll share is I will say, first day of a summer camp, right? I'm 52 years old. I find it really hard to make new friends. It's the truth. I tell that to the students, and I show my vulnerability. And believe me, if you're looking for strategies to draw in not only neurodivergent students, but all students, that's a really good one. So I'd put that in your toolkit if you haven't already. I bet a lot of you already have. But we don't need to be stronger. We don't need to be better. We need to be completely put together, right? Just need to be human, right? And students, they really resonate with that. We work on college preparation with our students. A lot of it is getting them to ask for what they need in appropriate ways, thinking ahead about classes they might need to take, get ready for school, that kind of thing. We provide leadership activities, teach self-advocacy. Of course, we learn a lot about neuroscience and neuroengineering, right? So a lot about the brain, brain-computer interface, brain implants, brain disease, brain functioning, that kind of stuff. And we learn about ethics related to emerging technology, right? Is it ethical to put a chip in someone's brain? Is what Elon Musk is doing, is that ethical? I'm not going to answer that question, but that's a really good question. And is he doing it incorrect? Okay. On this next slide, I'm sharing an image from one of our classroom activities. And this image, there is a model of a human skull. And there's a student who's writing on a piece of paper, and there are jars in front of the student, and each of those jars has a real brain in it from a mammal. And we're looking at brains to try and figure out the structure of the brain and what mammal that might go to. Like, for example, when we look at the brain of a dolphin, brainstem doesn't come out the bottom, right? In our brains, a brainstem comes out the bottom and goes right down our spinal cord. But a dolphin comes out this way, right? Because the dolphin's body is oriented this way. So we talk a lot about the design of the brain, and we use mammals for comparisons, and students really like that. I have two images on this next slide from our brain dissection class. And in the first image, there's a student reading a worksheet about dissecting a brain. And on the second slide, Dr. Chudler is there at a whiteboard, and the students look at him drawing an image, and he's talking about the meninges. Does anybody know what the meninges are, just by chance? Yeah? You care to say?
The protective layers on the outside.
That's exactly right. She said the protective layers on the outside of our brain, and they also carry blood vessels. Make it. Another strategy that I want to talk about today that I think is critical is the importance of hands-on learning. So hands-on learning, multiple ways to engage content, are critical for engaging all of our learners and are especially important for our neurodivergent learners. And I think some of our other speakers today are going to talk about the importance of multiple ways to engage content, assess learning. So I'm looking forward to learning more about that. It's such a critical piece of what we do. And some images on the slide. The first image is a young man, and he's holding a big piece of epoxy. Suspended in it are five brains from some really small mammals, and he's just looking at those brains and their structure. Another image shows students dissecting a sheep brain in a science lab. A third image shows Dr. Chudler with 3 students, and he's using string or yarn, and he's showing them how to make a simple model of a neuron by weaving the string together. And the last image is a piece of hardware on a bike rack that kind of looks like a face. And I'll talk more about that in a moment. So, where's the one? What's my brain nap? Oh, thank you. Someone brought it back to me. Okay. So all of your brain hats set it free. And we'll come back to however that saying goes. Okay. So, hands-on learning better engages both the left and right sides of our brain, right? Which is really important to learning. On the left side of our brain, listening and analyzing processes occur. And the right side handles more of the visual and spatial process, right? And so by using multiple styles of learning, the brain creates better connections and can store more relevant information, right? It's the hands-on stuff. It's that brain firing in more places, right? Brain scans also indicate increased activity in motor-related and sensory parts of the brain and thinking about concepts they learn through hands-on experiences. And so I did put links to some of these articles in the PowerPoints if you want to explore that a little bit further. But all I have to say, there is some really good science that says do the hands-on stuff. It makes a world of difference. So we've had a couple students who've been standouts, and I'm sure you have too. I have a neurodivergent learner who's just excelled above the rest in an amazing way. It kind of blows your mind, right? This is one of those students. Their name is Piper. And Piper excels so quickly that we've decided we need to provide more content to Piper to really engage this young mind. So this slide shows Piper. Piper developed a class, and Kaywood taught it with us and taught the other students. We supported Piper in doing this. And this is an image of Piper wearing a hat that they knitted that looks like a brain, and knitted out of pink yarn, which looks like a brain. And the class that Piper chose to build and present was on facial recognition. And so in the slide here, you can see there's a cup of coffee that looks like it has a smiley face in it. And there's a tree that looks like it has a grumpy face with the features on the bark of the tree. We talked about how the brain recognizes faces. We talked about babies, the importance for babies in recognizing a human face, recognizing mom, right, were the very, very first things a baby learns to do. And then for the hands-on component of this activity, Piper decided to send students on a scavenger hunt around campus and look for things that looked like faces. And then we all came back together and shared on images. They did such a nice job with that we sent them to some hands-on learning by developing and presenting a poster, the Science Society for Neuroscience Conference. This conference had 30,000 people from over 80 countries. And you might think, wait a second, neurodivergent students are often overstimulated by loud noises and big places and tons of people and all this stuff. And that's true. They really are. But that does not mean that they don't want to do it. And I've heard Rhonda talk before about some things, and I think she might even get into this a little bit later. And some of these challenges that these students face, yes, they are challenges, but they want to do them. They want to succeed. And so it's up to us to figure out how we put the supports in place to make sure that they are successful. Another thing that we find really important is offering options to students. Right? So those not wanting to dissect a sheep brain, they were offered another alternative. Right? We figured out a way that they could select a small group learning experience, the digital content on a laptop. Right? They could explore a brain digitally. You have to smell it, you have to touch it, dissect it, cut it open, none of that stuff. What I thought was interesting there is that when we told students we'd be doing this activity, there were 5 or 6 that said, I don't want to do that. And we said, no, that's okay, because we have this option. I want to do that. It's totally fine, no big deal. When the day came, every single student decided, oh, I'll try dissecting a sheep brain. And it was the choice, I think, that put them at ease, right? They realized, oh, I have a choice here. And as soon as they had a choice, I think a lot of their anxiety just dissipated. So you might hear some more today about offering choices to students and why that's important. And I bet a lot of you know about the autonomic nervous system, right? That's regulated by the amygdala, right? Amygdala is in the temporal lobe, it's this thing here. It's just out, it's kind of down the center. And autonomic nervous system, right? That's the fight or flight response. And the sympathetic and the parasympathetic nervous system, right? And also, the parasympathetic, opposite of fight and flight, they say rest, love, digest. That's not as catchy as fight or flight, but that helps you remember it. Again, offering choices that help students not trigger their amygdala, right? Not trigger that fight or flight, that panic, right? And so that's what we like to do. And if you want to find another rate, you can find this. Another thing that we really like to do with our students is let them drive the content of our classes. And so early on, when we have a series of classes for our students, we leave some of them blank. And we ask the students, what do you want to learn about? And that's very powerful. And so here are some examples of some of the things they have chosen. They chose, they wanted to learn about meditation, mindfulness, and how that impacts the brain. So we did that. We developed a class for that. They wanted to learn about music in the brain. They wanted to know if baby Mozart was a real thing. And if you play Mozart music to babies, that make them smarter? Anyone know the answer to that? It doesn't. They wanted to learn more about neuroethics, the ethical implications of building this technology and deploying this technology. And they wanted to learn about neuroscience in movies, right? So all the stuff they're seeing in the science fiction movies, how real is it? How soon will we see that stuff in real life? And could we talk about that? I want to talk about my favorite movies. And so we had a lot of fun with that. So we talked earlier, what's the basic building block, right, of learning? I hope you have good discussions. I hope you learn from one another. That was one of the goals I stated, is the first thing I said today. Hopefully you'll be learning from one another. From a neuroscience perspective, the basic building block of all learning is the rewiring of neurons into new patterns. That's learning. And what causes neurons to rewire? The scientific saying is that neurons that fire together wire together. Firing together means a sufficient number and depth of meaningful experiences. Some of you said experiences when we were talking about learning, right? A sufficient number and depth of meaningful experiences around a defined set of attitudes and behaviors causes the brain to rewire. It causes the brain to learn. Those are new patterns. And once they're rewired, these patterns are the new competence. So I said today at the outset, all of our brains will be different after the symposium today. So yeah, if you're engaging in a significant number of meaningful experiences, you will start to rewire your brain. And the more you think about it, the more you follow up with the speakers today, like call me anytime, send me an email anytime. I hope this is the beginning of a conversation. The more you find the PowerPoints after the conference and dig into this, your brain will change a lot, and it will change quickly. Another thing we find really important is near-peer leaders. How many of you do this in the classroom? How many of you invite, if you're a high school teacher and you've got sophomores that are neurodivergent, how many of you seek out juniors and seniors who are neurodivergent? Bring them over to your classroom when you can. Does anybody do that? Yeah, I saw a couple heads nod. Very powerful thing to do. A near peer is basically a peer mentor, right? A peer mentor is someone your own age. Near peer means they're just slightly older than you. And so we do this in the Tapped in the STEM Alliance. We do this at Neuroscience for Neurodiverse Learners. And some of the other projects you'll hear about today also do it. Near peer leaders, in our case, they help develop our schedule and prepare examples. They participate in online discussions when we have discussions online. They lead panel in the breakout rooms. They encourage everyone to celebrate student strengths. And they lead by example, help create group norms. The image that you see here was during COVID. We got funded for this on-site, hands-on, lab-focused neuroscience camp first day was January 2020, January 1st, 2020. Which was right when COVID began, right? And so we had to totally rethink what we were doing. This picture, it just tickled me. So this is one of our students, we're on Zoom, and they had a cross stitch, and they created some neurons, because the students were invited to create a neuron out of something around the house and then share it over Zoom. And this student did some cross stitch and did some neurons. Really fun. We really made the best of the limitations that were imposed by the pandemic. One thing I would encourage everybody to look at is assistive technology for your neurodivergent learners. Are there any AT specialists here? Yeah, one. All right, we appreciate you. All right. Yes, AT, there's a lot of it, and some of it's not very expensive at all, and some of it is really powerful. So there is technology, right, for note-taking, organizing ideas, technology that will help with reading and writing, organizing your calendar and your assignments and your commitments on your calendar. And there's an AT for mathematics. So this isn't my area. I can't go into great depth here. This could be a whole afternoon, right, of how this stuff works, how to get your hands on it, how to try it with students. But for now, I would encourage you, just remember that it's there. Just remember that someone on your post-secondary campus, or someone in your school district, or if you're lucky, someone in your school will know about this, and you can seek them out and ask them for consultation. And I bet you they will love it. Right? Where's my person back there? Oh, they're busy. But I guarantee we ask, do you like it when people come to you and say, hey, I need AT help? They always do, in my experience. For our classrooms at NNL, we did a pilot project where we offered smart pens to all the students. Has anyone used a smart pen before? Do you know how those work? Okay, just a couple heads. So how those work, they're really cool. It's a pen, and it comes with a notebook. And the notebook paper is incredibly special. It's encoded, right? And so the pen has a microphone in it. And so as the student sits and writes notes, the microphone records the lecture. So there's an audio recording of the lecture captured in the pen. And then the pen also knows exactly where on the page writing those notes, and it can attach that to the audio, right? And so that student, when they want to find, oh my gosh, I'm on page 10 here, and the instructor was talking about the amygdala. I really wish I could find that. But they could jump right to that section and listen to that lecture. They could find it really easy by using the smart pen. So we offered smart pens to all our students. We had about 8 of them take us up on it. We followed up a year later. We had like 5 out of the 8 still using their pen and just really appreciate their instructions. So students have to try the technology. They have to know about it. They have to get their hands on it. And a good way is to sometimes find that AT person, wherever they are, wherever you are. Ask them if you can borrow some stuff. Send a student to them. Ask them if a student can try something or borrow something. Even if you just get lucky with one student and one piece of AT and find a match, that can make all the difference in the world for that particular student. Okay,
We'll show it here.
So, another table discussion. I'd like to come around and see your great hands if I might. What are some common strengths among neurodivergent learners? So, I have some ideas in this space. I've asked a lot of students, what are you good at? What are you really good at? And I hope you've done that too. But even if you haven't, I'm sure you've made some observations. And so at your table, I would love for you to talk about, just for about, we could talk for maybe a good 10, 12 minutes, because I really want to see your hats and say hi. What are some common strengths? So please enjoy, talk amongst yourself, use the bathroom if you have to, and I'm going to come back up here about 10 or 12. So let's talk about some of the strengths. As I told you, I asked the students, what are you good at? What I didn't tell you was, I also asked their parents. I had a chance to ask many of their parents, what is your student good at? And what we found is shared here on a slide. And the number one thing that surprised me is that the neurodivergent students did incredibly well at online learning during the pandemic, right? I heard somebody say, yep. They did. They could control their surroundings. They could interact in different ways, right? They could use the chat feature, or they could talk audibly. They could raise their hand, right? There are different ways they can interact, different ways they could show that they're understanding the content. Creative thinking and problem solving, that's what Lee just said. Thank you, Lee. That was the number 2 thing that came up when we talked to students. Now, you might get different answers when you ask around or start thinking about this a little bit more. Persistence and dedication. That's what DJ said, right? Just very persistent, very focused. One thing that surprised me then, but looking back, it doesn't surprise me now, empathy and kindness and social skills, right? What's the first thing people say to you about social skills in neurodivergent students? They're not very good at it. A lot of them are extremely good at it. So things are evolving. Our understanding is evolving. Spatial memory and 3D thinking, music and artistic skills, honest and direct communication, right? How many of you have met a neurodivergent learner who is honest and direct? That's right. In our culture, sometimes that's not seen as very polite or very productive. But if you make space for it, it's actually pretty efficient. It actually works pretty well sometimes. Let's see, they ask a lot of questions, mathematics, wayfinding. And one thing I really love to see in our young people is a focus on social justice and fairness. A lot of these neurodivergent students have that. And so that's something we try to tap into, that social justice and fairness component. Okay, a couple little bits here. How many minutes do I have left? Can anybody tell me off the agenda? 7 minutes. Okay, we're going to do it. 7 minutes. I have a couple slides here that I would love for you to revisit when you have a little more time. I'm going to go through them a little quickly, but I have one slide. The citation is at the bottom of the slide. This slide says, what if autists were defined by strengths? This is about students on the autism spectrum. In the Pacific Northwest, that community, they are increasingly referring to themselves as autists. And so I just listened to them. What do you want to be called? What's going on? Used to be Aspies when I 12 years ago, and they preferred that. So if you prefer it, I'll say it. That's fine. Autists now. I'm using it a little bit, but I'm not on the spectrum, so I'm just seeing what they prefer and trying to monitor that. But what if they were defined by their strengths, right? Their peer relationships are characterized by absolute loyalty and impeccable dependability. They're generally, this isn't every single person, but tend to be more free of sexist and ageist cultural biases and ability to regard others at face value. Like, I see what I get, you see what you get kind of thing. They can speak their mind irrespective of the social context or adherence to personal beliefs, right? They will just say what's on their mind, and that can be a true strength. And there's some more of those. I encourage you to return to these slides, check them out. But the main point here is, what if we lived in a different world where these neurodivergent individuals were just defined by their strengths, and everybody embraced them for their strengths, right? Not what's wrong with you, but what are you really good at? And we've got a long list here of things we could focus on to try to move that direction. You might be saying, well, what about ADHD, dyslexia? Well, I did some poking around. I have a citation there at the bottom of this next slide. For ADHD, creative and intuitive thinkers, seekers of novelty, more comfort with risk-taking, right? So have any of you ever lived with a person with ADHD? Right? I see a couple of hands, right? Be comfortable with risk-taking sometimes, right? And compassionate, very compassionate people sometimes. Dyslexia, some of the research suggests better at three-dimensional thinking. They have some been found to process global visual spatial abilities. They can process blurred or ambiguous scenes, perceive peripheral or diffuse visual information better than some people without dyslexia. Right? Really interesting skill. And one story that I tell, I don't tell it often because it's not perfect, but I'll share it with you now. I'll share it in a really small group so we can talk about it a little bit, because it never comes out quite right. But imagine long ago, right? And people are sitting around the fire, and if everyone in that social group had exactly the same brain, that would be a problem, right? What you need is some people sitting around and staring at the fire and having a very serious conversation and figuring stuff out. But it'd be good to have at least one person, right, whose mind might wander a little bit, or might be looking off to the sides to see what's around. And when you have a blend of those, you have a bit safer group, right? Because maybe that person who has a mind that wanders a little, they might spot a threat in the distance, or they might spot an opportunity that the others didn't see because everyone is so darn focused on one conversation. So the point is, diverse minds, nature loves diversity and nature loves diverse minds. These minds, these neurodivergent minds, they wouldn't be here if they weren't necessary for us humans, right? They would have been weeded out, right? They're necessary and they're important. So I'm still working on that one. Maybe some of you could help me figure out how to say that a little bit better. And on a final thought, I just want to tell you, you have joined the brain hat makers of the world, and you are in excellent company. Here are Tibetan monks with Dr. Chudler on a mountainside in India. And there is Dr. Chudler. All that. So as I said, I would put everything on a slide there at the end. And really there it is. I'll go over it one last time here. Looks like I've got 3 minutes. So here's my summary of some of the things I hope you take away from this talk, this session today. With students, share what you're doing and why it's important. Every single time, right at the beginning, everything you're doing. That would go a long way, again, with all students. A lot of this is with all students, right? Feel free to use humor. Just think about it a little bit and check in with students and see how it's going. Build and share social narratives. NSF program officer, during this session, said to me, hey, we should build a social narrative for our large Includes Alliance. That would be a really cool thing to do. And yes, Chris, I agree. Let's see. Allow for hands-on learning. I think that's an obvious one. Encourage the students' teaching of others, like our student who built a class and then taught it to the other students. Huge learning occurs in that setting. You've got a near peer. You've also got someone who is teaching content. That everybody benefits. Offer options. Allow for student-driven content. Be aware of assistive technology. Focus on student strengths. I try to always do that. Be genuine and lead from the heart. I probably should have added that to this list. And explore how to coach executive functioning skills. Those are, lost my brain again. Can anyone show me on their brain hat where are the executive functioning skills? Yeah, she can. And they are pointing to right there, Colonel. That's good. Okay, great. Well, let's do this. Thank you, symposium organizers, so much. Thank you. Good. I really would like to acknowledge the people who funded some of this work I've been doing. So I have on this slide, the logo for NNL, Neuroscience for Neurodiverse Learners. It's the NSF iTest Award. The Alliance for Students with Disabilities for Inclusion, Networking, and Transition Opportunities in STEM. Thank you for your funding. And then a little note there that says the conclusions or recommendations expressed here are those of the authors and not necessarily those of the National Science Foundation, but I do hope you agree with some of the things that I said today, if you're out there. Okay, thanks so much.